Daniel Black, they call me Dan. I finished my Navy career as an E5. I was a sonarman. So then from Pearl Harbor on over to Japan. The aircraft carrier usually pulled into Yokosuka. The squadrons, our squadron, would offload to a little base called Opama. It was a former Japanese seaplane base. It was in Tokyo Harbor. The fixed wing S2S would fly off to a base called Atsugi. So the shiplet might be there in port for 10, 12 days while the squadrons offload, and then we do our operations out of wherever we happen to be. It was quite interesting, obviously, to see Japan, even though it was, this is 1956, so it's 10 years after the war. They treated the servicemen fairly. It was still interesting to see that country, recognizing what the war was all about as much as we could. The cruise continued on down. We saw Kobe, Osaka. We're able to go ashore and see some of those, the temples and things like that. It was the first time we took a tour on a bus. We got on a Japanese bus, and the seats were so narrow that two of us couldn't sit side by side. They just didn't make the seats to fit Navy sailors. So from there on down to Sasebo, which was also a very popular port to go into. So we saw other parts of Japan, and then interestingly enough, went to Hong Kong. And we went to Hong Kong, and we pulled into Hong Kong in November of 56. And at that time, the Hungarian Revolution was going on, and the Russians were attacking Hungary. And as the ship pulled in, and the tug is trying to get you into the pier, and they weren't going to anchor, they were just going to stay off. So we didn't go to the pier, we anchored out in the bay, and all these little Chinese junks came up close. So they had the ship's company on the Boxer man the fire hoses. Fire hoses all around the ship. No, let them get close. And of course we're wondering, what's this all about? Well, there's a possibility that they could attach bombs to the hull and that sort of thing, so we don't want to let them get close. At the same time, sailors on the flight deck or hangar deck are throwing coins off the side, and these young Chinese people are diving off the junks into the water after the coins, but at the same time the fire hoses are trying to keep them from getting too close. So anyway, we're in Hong Kong, and it's port and starboard liberty. One side off, one side has to go ashore. So first thing you do, our day to go to shore, everyone goes to shore, and almost the first thing you do is go to a clothing shop. Got to go get some clothes because the Hong Kong tailor is famous. You get into the Hong Kong tailor shop, and the first thing they do is give you a cold bottle of San Miguel beer, and you can't even finish it before they give you another one. And by the time you get out of there, you've bought some type of wool suit coat or pants that you probably would never wear, which almost all of us bought those. And they said, now they'll be ready in about 5 days. Well, 2 days later, when we were waiting, it was port and starboard liberty, so we're back the next day. And then the first thing you know, I think it was on the 5th of November, the Suez Canal was bombed. So all of a sudden, the ship, all liberty's been canceled. We're bringing everybody back from Hong Kong, bringing them back from shore. Those people who have clothing to pick up that think it might be ready, we're going to let you go get them because we're taking off. And we did. We pulled out of Hong Kong way before they were scheduled to pull out of Hong Kong. Again, as we're young sailors, we're not sure what this is all about other than what they tell us. But so we left Hong Kong because of both the Hungarian problem with the Russians going back into Hungary, and then the Suez Canal was bombed. So the concept, as we understand it, was don't leave aircraft carriers in port anywhere, and certainly not when you're this far away from where you should be. So then we went out and just circled around the South China Sea for probably almost 3 weeks. By that time, there wasn't even any powder to make powdered milk with. I mean, the food was at that time just scraps almost, because we weren't getting any supplies and there was no supply ships right in the area. But nonetheless, we headed back up then and spent I guess this was in November. So we got back up into Yokosuka probably by around Christmas time, and most of us spent either Christmas on the ship or offloaded at the base where they would send the squadron. So it was an interesting cruise. Everybody was told this will be the last cruise of the Boxer. Turns out it wasn't, but we were told it was going to be the last cruise because they were talking about not doing anything with it. As I understand, subsequently it became an assault type vessel for a couple of more years. So we headed back to the States, got back to the United States probably in February of '57. Interesting cruise, very enjoyable. I think we all learned a lot of things, what it's like to be out at sea and on an aircraft carrier. The Boxer was an Essex class, was not modified. It did not have the closed-in bow. It didn't have the canted flight deck. It still had the wooden flight deck. In fact, fortunately, we lost no aircraft. The fixed wings didn't lose any planes. They had a couple that kind of crash landed on the deck, and it was interesting. The propellers would dig into the wood because those were wooden flight decks, whereas the newer aircraft carriers had a molded flight deck of some sort.